The moving truck had barely pulled away when Grace Vaughn noticed him standing on the balcony next door, coffee cup in hand, watching the sunrise over the city skyline. She was exhausted from unpacking boxes all night in her modest one-bedroom apartment, her hair thrown up in a messy bun, wearing paint-stained sweatpants and an oversized college t-shirt. He was impeccably dressed even at 6 in the morning, dark hair perfectly styled, wearing what looked like an expensive white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his forearms. Their eyes met for just a moment before Grace quickly looked away, suddenly self-conscious about her disheveled appearance. The apartment building was one of those converted warehouses in the downtown district, all exposed brick and industrial windows. Grace had scraped together every penny of her savings as a freelance graphic designer to afford even the smallest unit here. The neighborhood was undergoing rapid gentrification, and she knew she was lucky to have found this place before prices skyrocketed even further. She had moved to the city 3 months ago after her mother passed away, leaving behind the small town where she had spent her entire 24 years caring for her sick parent. Now, she was finally ready to start her own life, though the grief still felt fresh and overwhelming on quiet mornings. She didn't see her neighbor again for almost a week. Grace spent her days setting up a small office space in the corner of her living room, reaching out to potential clients and trying to establish herself in a competitive market. The walls between their apartments were surprisingly thin for such an upscale building, and she could sometimes hear him talking on the phone late at night. His voice was deep and measured, always professional, though she tried not to eavesdrop. She learned his name was Xander when a delivery person knocked on her door by mistake one afternoon, holding an enormous package addressed to Xander Lawson in Unit 12. Grace carried the package next door and knocked. When he answered, she was struck by how tall he was, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and an athletic build that suggested he actually used the building's gym regularly. His gray eyes studied her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "This was delivered to my place by mistake," she said, holding out the box. "Thank you." His voice was warm and a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "You must be the new neighbor. I'm Xander, Grace." She shifted her weight, suddenly aware that she was wearing her usual work-from-home uniform of leggings and an oversized sweater. "I moved in last week. Welcome to the building. If you need anything, I am right next door." There was something genuine in his offer, not just polite small talk. "Thanks. I appreciate that." She smiled and turned to leave, feeling his gaze follow her down the hallway. The next morning, Grace woke to the smell of something burning. Panicked, she rushed out of her apartment to find smoke seeping from under Xander's door. She pounded on it frantically until he opened it, looking surprisingly flustered for someone who usually seemed so composed. "Are you okay?" "I smelled smoke," she said, trying to peer past him into the apartment. "I am fine. Just having a minor disagreement with my stove." He stepped aside to let her see the kitchen, where a pan sat smoking on the burner, its contents completely blackened. The smoke alarm started beeping shrilly, and he reached up to disable it with practiced ease. "I was attempting to make breakfast before a meeting." Grace couldn't help but laugh. Attempting being the key word. "Do you mind if I help? I can't let my neighbor burn the building down on my second week here." He hesitated for just a moment before nodding. "I would actually appreciate that. My cooking skills are admittedly limited." His apartment was easily 3 times the size of hers, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. The furniture was modern and expensive-looking, all clean lines and neutral colors. The kitchen was state-of-the-art, with appliances that probably cost more than her entire year's rent. She opened his refrigerator to find it mostly empty, except for some eggs, milk, and takeout containers. "You do not cook often, do you?" she asked, pulling out the eggs. "I usually eat at the office or have something delivered." He leaned against the counter, watching her with curiosity. "I have been meaning to learn, but I never seem to find the time." "What do you do?" Grace asked as she cracked eggs into a bowl, whisking them with practiced efficiency. "I work in manufacturing. My family has a company that produces industrial equipment." It was a vague answer, but she did not push. "What about you, freelance graphic designer?" "I just moved here from Millbrook, about 2 hours north. I am trying to build up a client base in the city." "Millbrook. I drove through there once. Small town, right? Very small. Everyone knows everyone." She poured the eggs into a clean pan, adjusting the heat. "I needed a change of scenery after my mom died. She had been sick for a long time and I was her primary caregiver. The house felt too empty without her." "I am sorry for your loss." His voice was soft, sincere. "Thank you. It has been an adjustment being on my own for the first time in my life. But it feels right, like this is where I am supposed to be." She plated the scrambled eggs and added some toast she had made. "Here. Edible breakfast as promised." Xander took a bite and his eyes widened slightly. "This is really good. Much better than my attempts." "The secret is low heat and patience. Most people cook eggs too hot and too fast." She glanced at the clock on his expensive-looking stove. "Did you not say you had a meeting?" "Yes, in 45 minutes downtown." He ate quickly but not rushed, somehow managing to make even that look refined. "Then I should let you get ready. Try not to burn anything else." She headed toward the door and he followed. "Grace, thank you, really, for the rescue and the breakfast." He pulled out his wallet and tried to hand her some cash, but she waved it away. "Neighbors help neighbors, no payment necessary," she smiled. "Just remember to turn off your stove next time." After that morning, they developed an easy friendship. Xander would knock on her door some evenings with takeout from expensive restaurants, claiming he had accidentally ordered too much food. Grace knew he was being kind, but she appreciated the gesture more than she would admit. Money was tight, and she was still trying to land her first major client in the city. They would sit on her small balcony, sharing meals and talking about everything and nothing. He was surprisingly easy to talk to once he relaxed, with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard. She learned that he was 28, had gone to business school at an Ivy League university, and had taken over much of the day-to-day operations of his family's company after his father had a heart attack 2 years ago. He worked constantly, often from early morning until late at night, and seemed to carry the weight of enormous responsibility on his shoulders. Grace found herself wanting to ease that burden somehow, to make him smile more often. Xander learned that Grace had always dreamed of being an artist, but had chosen graphic design as a more practical career path. She had a younger sister who was finishing college and planning to travel Europe for a year. Grace had never been abroad, had barely been outside their home state before moving to the city. She loved old movies, could quote entire scenes from classic romances, and had a weakness for chocolate croissants from the bakery down the street. One evening about a month after they had first met, Grace was working late on a project when she heard shouting through the wall. It was Xander's voice, louder than she had ever heard it, tense with frustration. She could not make out the words, but the anger was clear. Then silence. She debated whether to check on him, not wanting to intrude but worried nonetheless. Before she could decide, there was a knock at her door. When she opened it, Xander stood there looking exhausted and defeated, his tie loosened and his hair disheveled from running his hands through it. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. "Can I just sit here for a while? I do not want to be alone right now." His vulnerability surprised her, and she immediately stepped aside to let him in. Of course. Come in. He sank onto her small couch, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. Grace sat beside him, close but not touching, giving him space to speak when he was ready. We lost a major contract today. 6 months of work, hundreds of thousands of dollars invested in development, and the client just walked away. His voice was hollow. My father built this company from nothing, and I feel like I am slowly watching it crumble under my leadership. Is the company in trouble? She asked carefully. No, we are financially stable, but we are not growing the way we should be. The industry is changing, and I am trying to modernize our approach while dealing with a board that wants to do things the way they have always been done. It is exhausting fighting every single day. He looked at her with those gray eyes, and she saw the strain he usually hid so well. I am sorry. You do not need to hear all this. I asked because I care. She reached out and took his hand without thinking. His fingers closed around hers immediately, warm and strong. You are allowed to be frustrated. This sounds incredibly difficult. Everyone expects me to have all the answers because my last name is on the building. But half the time I am just guessing and hoping I do not destroy everything my father built. He laughed bitterly. I spend 14 hours a day at the office, and I still feel like I am failing. Xander, you took over your family's company at 26 after your father had a heart attack. You did not get to ease into this role or learn gradually. You were thrown into the deep end, and you have been swimming ever since. That is not failure. That is survival. Grace squeezed his hand. And from what you have told me, you have actually been doing more than surviving. You have been innovating, trying to position the company for the future. That takes courage. He turned to look at her fully, and something shifted in the air between them. How do you always know what to say? I spent years talking my mom through her fears about dying. You learn to find the right words when the stakes are that high. She smiled sadly. Plus, I see you, Xander. I see how hard you work, how much you care. Give yourself some credit. They sat there in comfortable silence, hands still linked, until Xander finally seemed to relax. He stayed for another hour, and they watched an old movie on her laptop, Grace's head eventually resting against his shoulder. When he left close to midnight, he hugged her tightly at the door. Thank you for tonight, he said softly into her hair. Anytime, I mean that. After that night, something changed between them. The casual dinners became more frequent, more intimate. Xander started coming home from work earlier when he could, always stopping by her place first to see if she wanted to grab food or just talk. Grace found herself thinking about him constantly, looking forward to his knock at her door, missing him when a day went by without seeing him. She tried to tell herself they were just friends, that someone like him could never be interested in someone like her. He probably came from old money, moved in circles she could not even imagine. She was a struggling freelance designer who clipped coupons and bought generic brands at the grocery store. But the way he looked at her sometimes made her heart race. The way he remembered little details about her life, brought her chocolate croissants on mornings when she had big project deadlines, texted her funny observations during his long meetings. The way he always found excuses to touch her, a hand on her lower back as they walked, fingers brushing as they reached for the same thing, sitting close enough that their thighs pressed together. 2 months after they had first met, Grace finally landed a major client through a contact she had been cultivating for weeks. It was a rebranding project for a chain of upscale boutique hotels, and the contract would keep her financially stable for at least 6 months. She was so excited when she got the confirmation email that she ran straight to Xander's apartment and pounded on his door. When he opened it, clearly just back from the office in his suit and tie, she threw her arms around his neck without thinking. I got it. I got the hotel contract." She was practically bouncing with excitement. His arms came around her waist automatically, lifting her slightly off the ground as he spun her around. "Grace, that is incredible. I knew you would get it." When he set her down, they were standing very close, her hands still on his shoulders, his hands on her waist. The smile faded from his face as his eyes dropped to her lips. Grace's breath caught. The moment stretched between them, electric and full of possibility. Then his phone rang shrilly from inside the apartment, shattering the moment. He stepped back, running a hand through his hair, and she saw frustration flash across his face. "I should get that. It might be the Tokyo office." He gave her an apologetic look. "But we are celebrating your success tonight. Dinner at Marcello's at 7, and I am not taking no for an answer." Marcello's was one of the most expensive Italian restaurants in the city, the kind of place Grace had only read about in magazines. "Xander, that is too much. You just landed your first major client. This is a big deal and you deserve to celebrate properly. Please let me do this for you." She wanted to argue, but the genuine happiness in his eyes made her nod. "Okay, but I do not have anything nice enough to wear to a place like that." "Wear anything. You always look beautiful." He said it so matter-of-factly, already turning to grab his phone, that she wondered if he even realized what he had said. Grace spent the rest of the afternoon in a panic, trying on every item in her limited wardrobe. She finally settled on a simple black dress she had bought for her mother's funeral, but never worn. It was elegant and understated, hitting just above her knees. She curled her shoulder-length brown hair and applied more makeup than usual, studying herself critically in the mirror. At exactly 7 o'clock, there was a knock at her door. Xander stood there in dark slacks and a gray button-down that matched his eyes, holding a single rose. He looked at her like she had stolen his breath. "You look stunning," he said softly, handing her the rose. The restaurant was everything she had imagined and more. Soft lighting, crisp white tablecloths, and waiters who moved with practiced elegance. She felt out of place until Xander pulled out her chair and sat across from her, his full attention making her feel like the only person in the room. "I have never been anywhere this fancy," she admitted, looking at the menu with its complete lack of prices. "Neither had I until I was forced to attend business dinners. My father used to take clients to places like this, and I always thought it was excessive. But now I understand the appeal. It is not about the food, though that helps. It is about creating a space where you can focus entirely on the person you are with." He looked at her steadily. "And tonight, I want to focus entirely on you." They talked throughout the meal, the conversation flowing as easily as the wine Xander ordered. He asked about her creative process, seemed genuinely interested in the challenges of freelancing, and listened intently when she described her vision for the hotel project. She asked about his work, and he opened up about the pressures he faced, the difficult decisions he had to make daily, the fear that he would disappoint his father. "Does your dad know how hard you are working to honor his legacy?" Grace asked over dessert. "He thinks I should take more time off, enjoy being young. He feels guilty that I had to take over so quickly." Xander swirled the wine in his glass. "But I cannot walk away. This company is our family's entire history, 3 generations of work. I will not be the one who lets it fail." "You will not let it fail. You care too much." She reached across the table and took his hand. "Your father is lucky to have you. I am the lucky one." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, the gesture sending shivers up her arm. "Meeting you has been the best thing to happen to me in a very long time, Grace." Her heart hammered in her chest. "Xander, I know we have not known each other very long, but I cannot stop thinking about you. You have become the best part of my day, the person I want to share every small victory and frustration with. You make everything easier just by existing in my life." He took a breath, his eyes intense. "I am trying to be a gentleman and not rush this, but I need you to know how I feel." "I feel the same way," she whispered. "I have been trying not to because you are you and I am just. You are extraordinary. You are talented and kind and so strong. Do not diminish yourself." His voice was fierce. "I have dated plenty of women who came from the right families and said all the right things, and I felt nothing. Then you move in next door in your paint-stained sweatpants and somehow turn my entire world upside down." Grace laughed, tears pricking her eyes. "This feels like a dream." "Then we are having the same dream." He paid the check despite her protests and drove them home in his sleek black car that probably cost more than she would make in several years. When they reached their floor, he walked her to her door like it was a first date. She turned to face him, nervous and excited all at once. "Thank you for tonight. For everything," she said softly. "Grace, can I kiss you?" His voice was rough, his control clearly fraying. Instead of answering, she rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. He responded immediately, one hand cupping her face while the other pulled her closer by the waist. The kiss was everything she had imagined and more, gentle but passionate, full of weeks of pent-up longing. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that since the first morning I saw you on your balcony," he admitted. "I looked terrible that morning. You looked real. You looked like someone I wanted to know." He kissed her again, softer this time. "Can I take you out again tomorrow and the day after that? I want to do this right." "I would like that very much." They went on proper dates after that. Xander took her to art galleries and concerts, introduced her to his favorite spots in the city. Grace learned that despite his wealth and business acumen, he was surprisingly down to earth. He had grown up solidly middle class, his father building the company slowly over decades. The real money had only come in the last 10 years, and Xander still was not entirely comfortable with it. He drove a nice car but lived relatively modestly, donated significantly to charity, and treated service workers with genuine respect. 1 month into their relationship, Grace had a moment of panic. She was at his apartment working on her laptop while he reviewed contracts, enjoying the comfortable silence of being together. When she went to get some water from the kitchen, she noticed an invitation on the counter addressed to Xander Lawrence, CEO of Lawrence Industrial Manufacturing. She picked it up, reading the details of some charity gala, and then pulled out her phone to search his company. The results made her stomach drop. Lawrence Industrial Manufacturing was not just some family business. It was a multinational corporation with annual revenues in the billions. They manufactured specialized equipment for everything from construction to aerospace. And Xander was not just involved in the company, he was the CEO, the primary shareholder, and according to several business magazines, one of the youngest billionaires in the country. "Grace, are you okay?" Xander appeared in the kitchen doorway, concern etched on his face. "Why did you not tell me?" She held up her phone, showing an article titled, "Billionaire CEO Xander Lawson Transforms Legacy Manufacturing Giant." He paled slightly. "I was going to. I just wanted you to get to know me first, without that clouding everything." "Xander, we have been dating for a month. When exactly were you planning to mention you are a billionaire?" She was not angry exactly, just overwhelmed and a bit hurt that he had kept something so significant from her. "Would it have changed anything if I told you that first day? Would you have given me a chance?" He stepped closer but did not touch her. "Every woman I have dated before you saw dollar signs. They wanted the lifestyle, the status, the money. You are the first person to just see me. I understand wanting to protect yourself, But this is a massive thing to keep secret. I told you everything about my life, my struggles with money, my grief over my mom, everything. And you let me while hiding that you are insanely wealthy." She set down her phone and crossed her arms. "It makes me feel foolish." "You are not foolish. I am the one who handled this badly." He ran his hand through his hair in frustration. "I just kept thinking I would tell you tomorrow, and then tomorrow would come and everything was so good between us that I did not want to risk it." "I am sorry, Grace. I should have been honest from the beginning." She studied him carefully, seeing the genuine remorse in his eyes. "No more secrets. If this is going to work, I need honesty." "No more secrets," he agreed immediately. "Ask me anything. How rich are you exactly?" "My personal net worth is approximately $2.5 billion, most of it tied up in the company. I have a substantial liquid assets portfolio, various investments and property holdings." He said it clinically, like reading a balance sheet. Grace sat down heavily on one of his bar stools. "That is an incomprehensible amount of money. I know it is a lot to process, but it does not change who I am or how I feel about you." He moved to stand in front of her, taking her hands. "I am still the same person who burned his breakfast and needed you to rescue him. Still the same person who would rather spend a quiet evening with you than attend another networking event. The money is just money. Except, it is not just money, Xander. It is power and influence and opportunities I cannot even imagine. We come from completely different worlds." She felt tears threatening. "I was so happy an hour ago, and now I feel like everything has shifted." "Nothing has shifted except your knowledge of my bank balance." His voice was urgent. "I am still the man who is falling in love with you. That has not changed." Her breath caught. "Falling in love with me?" "Yes, I am falling in love with you, Grace Vaughn. Actually, I think I have been falling since you knocked on my door with my misdelivered package, looking adorably flustered." He cupped her face gently. "Please do not let the money ruin this. Please." Grace closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his hands, remembering all their moments together over the past 2 months. He had never made her feel less than, had never flaunted his wealth or made her feel inadequate about her financial situation. He had just been Xander, her neighbor who made her laugh and held her when she cried about missing her mother and kissed her like she was precious. "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered, opening her eyes to meet his. "But this is scary. Your world is so different from mine." "Then we will figure it out together. I do not want to live in my world without you in it." He kissed her softly. "I will spend every day proving that this is real if that is what it takes." They talked for hours that night, Xander answering every question she had about his life, his company, his wealth. He showed her pictures of his parents, told her stories about growing up in a modest house with a father who worked 18-hour days to build something from nothing. The money had come later when the company went public and exploded in value, but the values his parents instilled never changed. "My mother still clips coupons," he said with a laugh. "My father drives a 15-year-old truck because he says it still runs fine. They live in the same house I grew up in. The wealth is strange for all of us." "Will they like me?" Grace asked nervously. "They are going to love you. My mother has been harassing me about settling down for years. She will probably cry with relief when I bring you home." He pulled Grace into his lap on the couch. "But only if you are ready for that. No pressure. I would like to meet them, eventually." She curled into his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. "I am sorry I freaked out earlier. You had every right to. I should have told you sooner." He kissed the top of her head. "I promise, no more secrets." Their relationship deepened after that conversation. Xander was true to his word about transparency, including Grace in all aspects of his life. She attended some company events with him. met his executives and board members, and slowly grew more comfortable in his world. She was surprised to find that many of the people in his circle were kind and genuine, interested in her work and respectful of her relationship with Xander. 4 months into their relationship, Xander asked Grace to move into his apartment. She had been hesitant at first, worried about moving too fast, but he had made a compelling argument. "You are already here most nights anyway. Your lease is up next month, and I hate when you leave." He had been holding her in his bed, early morning light filtering through the windows. "Move in with me. Officially make this your home." "What if it does not work out?" she had asked, always the practical one. "Then we will figure it out like adults. But Grace, I know this is going to work out. I have never been more certain of anything in my life." He had rolled over to look at her directly. "I love you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. Let me make this your home." So she had moved next door, combining her modest possessions with his expensive furniture, turning his sterile apartment into something warm and lived in. She set up her office in one of his spare bedrooms, a space 3 times larger than what she had before. He cleared out half his enormous closet for her significantly smaller wardrobe, and did not bat an eye when she brought her collection of thrift store throw pillows that clashed with his designer couch. "This is perfect," he had said the first night after everything was unpacked, looking around at the space that now reflected both of them. "This is what it was always supposed to look like." Grace introduced Xander to her younger sister Emma over video chat, since Emma was backpacking through Southeast Asia. Emma had been shocked but supportive, making Grace promise to bring Xander to visit when she returned to the States. Xander had been charming and funny, asking Emma about her travels and promising to take good care of her sister. "He is definitely in love with you," Emma had texted Grace after the call. "Like disgustingly head over heels in love. Hold on to that one." Meeting Xander's parents was more nerve-wracking. They drove 3 hours to the suburb where he had grown up, pulling up to a modest ranch house with a well-maintained lawn. His mother opened the door before they even reached it, a small woman with Xander's gray eyes and warm smile. "You must be Grace." She pulled Grace into a tight hug. "I am Margaret, and I am so happy to finally meet you." His father, Robert, was a larger man with silver hair and a firm handshake. He had the same build as Xander, broad-shouldered and tall, and despite having had a heart attack, he looked healthy and strong. He studied Grace carefully before breaking into a genuine smile. "So you are the woman who finally got my son to think about something besides work," Robert said. "We have been hoping you would visit." Dinner was a loud, happy affair. Margaret had cooked enough food for an army, and she kept pressing seconds on Grace while sharing embarrassing stories about Xander's childhood. Grace learned that he had been a serious, driven child even then, always reading business books and planning elaborate money-making schemes with the neighborhood kids. "He used to make me business proposals in PowerPoint for why I should increase his allowance," Margaret said with a laugh. "At 10 years old, we knew he was destined for this." "I had very compelling arguments," Xander said defensively, but he was grinning. After dinner, Robert asked to speak with Grace privately. They went out to the back porch and Grace felt her anxiety spike. Robert settled into a worn patio chair and gestured for her to sit. "You do not need to look so scared. I just wanted to thank you," he said kindly. "Thank me for bringing my son back to me. After I got sick and he took over the company, I watched him disappear into work. He stopped calling just to talk, stopped coming home except for holidays. Every conversation was about business." Robert's voice was thick with emotion. "But since he met you, he is different. He calls to tell me about the restaurants you have tried or the movies you have watched. He leaves the office at reasonable hours." He laughs again. You gave me my son back, and for that I am grateful. Grace felt tears prick her eyes. He gave me something too. A reason to believe in happiness again after losing my mom. We kind of saved each other. That is what the best relationships do. Support each other, make each other better. Robert smiled. He is going to marry you, you know, probably sooner rather than later if I know my son. We have not talked about that, Grace said, blushing. You will, and when you do, I hope you say yes. You are exactly what he needs. 8 months after they first met, Xander took Grace back to the restaurant where they had their first real date. She was suspicious immediately because he seemed nervous, which was unlike him. Throughout dinner, he kept fidgeting with his napkin, losing his place in conversations, and watching her with an intensity that made her heart race. "What is going on with you tonight?" she finally asked over dessert. "I have something I want to ask you." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Grace, this past year has been the best of my life. You have made every day brighter, every challenge more bearable. You have made my apartment feel like a home, made this city feel like our city. I cannot imagine my future without you in it." He stood up from the table, and Grace's breath caught as he moved to kneel beside her chair. The entire restaurant seemed to fall silent, though that might have been her imagination. "I love you more than I knew was possible to love someone. You are my best friend, my partner, my home. You are everything I did not know I was missing." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a stunning diamond ring, elegant and understated, exactly what she would have chosen for herself. "Grace Elizabeth Vaughn, will you marry me?" Tears were streaming down her face, and she could barely speak past the lump in her throat. "Yes. Yes, of course yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms and kissing her deeply as the restaurant erupted in applause. When they finally broke apart, both crying and laughing, he whispered against her lips, "I was so nervous you might say no. Never. I would never say no to you." They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony at his parents' house, surrounded by close friends and family. Grace wore a simple white dress that made Xander cry when she walked down the makeshift aisle in the backyard. Emma was her maid of honor, having returned from her travels just in time. Xander's best friend from college was his best man. It was intimate and perfect, everything they wanted. Margaret cried through the entire ceremony. Robert walked Grace down the aisle since her own father had never been in the picture, and she felt surrounded by love from all sides. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Xander kissed her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "Forever home," he whispered against her lips, and she knew exactly what he meant. It was not about the apartment or the city or any physical space. It was about finding each other, about building a life together. He was her forever home, and she was his. They honeymooned in Italy for 2 weeks, eating incredible food and exploring ancient cities. Xander had offered to take her anywhere in the world, and she had chosen Italy because of their first dinner at Marcello's, wanting to experience the real thing together. They walked hand in hand through Rome and Florence and Venice, taking thousands of pictures and falling even more deeply in love. When they returned, real life settled in beautifully. Grace's design business thrived, and she eventually hired 2 junior designers to help with the workload. Xander continued leading the company, but made a conscious effort to maintain work-life balance, coming home for dinner most nights and keeping weekends sacred for them. They hosted his parents for holidays and visited Emma whenever she landed in a new city. 2 years after their wedding, Grace discovered she was pregnant. She had been feeling off for weeks, exhausted and emotional, before finally taking a test. When the 2 lines appeared, she sat on the bathroom floor and cried happy tears. That evening, She surprised Xander by serving him dinner with a small pair of baby shoes as a centerpiece. He stared at them for a long moment before his eyes went wide. "Are you serious? Are we having a baby?" "We are having a baby," she confirmed, laughing as he jumped up and swept her into his arms. "I love you so much. You are giving me everything." He was crying again, and she wiped his tears with her thumbs. "We are building this together, our family, our life, everything." Their daughter, Maya Rose Lawson, was born on a snowy December morning. She had Xander's gray eyes and Grace's brown hair, and she was absolutely perfect. Xander held her for the first time with shaking hands, looking at Grace with such overwhelming love and gratitude that she started crying all over again. "She is ours," he said in wonder. "We made this perfect person." Margaret and Robert were at the hospital within hours, already besotted grandparents. Emma flew in from wherever she had been traveling, ready to be the fun aunt. Their small family had grown and expanded, full of love and laughter and hope. On Maya's first birthday, Grace found Xander standing in the nursery doorway watching their daughter sleep. She slipped her arms around his waist from behind, and he covered her hands with his. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. "That morning you moved in next door. How I had no idea that the exhausted woman in paint-stained sweatpants would become my entire world." He turned to face her. "I keep thinking about all the ways we might have never met. If you had chosen a different apartment building, if I had not burned my breakfast, if either of us had been too afraid to take a chance. It terrifies me how easily I could have missed you. But you did not miss me. We found each other and we built this beautiful life." She reached up to cup his face. "And we are going to keep building it together for the rest of our lives." He kissed her, soft and sweet, in the doorway of their daughter's room. Through the windows of their apartment, the city lights twinkled like stars. They had built more than a home together in these rooms. They had built a family, a partnership, a love that would last forever. "My forever home," Xander whispered against her hair. "My forever home," Grace echoed, knowing with complete certainty that this was exactly where she was always meant to be. Not just in this apartment or this city, but here in his arms, building a life with the man who had once been just the neighbor next door and was now her everything. Years later, when people asked them how they met, they always laughed and said it started with a burnt breakfast and a missed delivery. But really, it started the moment they were brave enough to see each other, to be vulnerable, to take a chance on the possibility of love. And that chance had given them everything they could ever want or need.